I'm guessing it's ready now? It's ready? Here we go. Yeah, so I'm Thomas Lattimore, and welcome to a session on working effectively in distributed teams. So if that's a session you're here for, great. If not, I won't be offended if you walk out now, but we will be locking the doors after this. This is your last warning. Who am I? I work for Platform SH. I primarily do JavaScript stuff on customer-facing things, but I have a background in Drupal and have been working in distributed teams for around 8 years at this point, and working fully remote for almost 6, I think. Numbers a little fuzzy on that. But yeah, I worked in client services for a number of years on large Drupal projects, anything from business automation stuff to media companies and things like that, and now do JavaScript all the time. If you're not familiar with Platform, it's a platform as a service for developing and delivering applications in Drupal, Node.js, and lots of other languages. We support Python, Ruby on Rails, or I guess Ruby technically, but most Ruby things are Rails anyway. And in addition to that, we also support a lot of other services like Elasticsearch, Solar, those sort of things that you come to expect. Platform SH does have several offices around the world, but the majority of the company does work remotely. I think about 90% probably work remote the majority of the time, if not the whole time. So, and everybody on the team I work on, except one person, primarily works from home. So before we get started, maybe if there's someone here that doesn't work on a distributed team, they may ask why. Like, why work for a distributed team in the first place? One reason, and I think the biggest reason, is that it expands the talent you have available for your company. Whenever you hire and lock into a specific region, it severely limits who you can hire, and being able to hire remotely, whether it's across regions in a continent or across time zones or national lines or anything like that, it significantly expands the reach that you can hire. And then also, I think a benefit of it is that not only does it expand the number of people that you can potentially hire, but in my experience also can bring the benefit of being able to hire people that have more experience, because in order to really get experience on the job, you have to get years on the job. And in order to get years on the job, that many times means having more life commitments. So you got social commitments, you got maybe a family, you got a mortgage, all that kind of stuff that make it harder to relocate to another region for a job. And when you hire remotely, you don't have to ask people to do that. It offers more flexibility for your team. So if there's people that like working in an office, they can go to a co-working space or work at coffee shops or rent out their own office or things like that. If there's people that like more solitude, they can work from home 100% of the time. It doesn't force people into one model of how to work. It doesn't force people into a commute. Commutes kind of suck. I did one only for even a few days a week for a period of time, and not a fan. Not a fan of commutes, and yeah. I think that's self-explanatory. And working from home or in a distributed team environment can boost productivity. Does not inherently boost productivity, but it can, especially if you work in an office environment where maybe, let's say you're a developer and you share a space that also has sales in there that will come by and interrupt engineers. When you work remote, the physical barrier makes that type of thing a little bit more difficult. And you don't end up working in an environment like this. And if you work in an environment like this, I'm not hating, but I will say that this type of thing, a completely open office is basically a warehouse with some desks shoved in it and some sound panels on the ceiling. Generally not conducive to deep work. And even then, you'll notice in the photo, you have a lot of people that are sitting in the office that still have headphones on. So why even come to the office, if you're just going to listen to headphones? Offices can be beneficial for collaborative work, but for really deep work like programming, or even if you are a project manager and having to write lengthy specification docs and proposals and things like that, that type of environment's not great for it. So covering some of the sort of the highlights of benefits of remote work. How do we avoid pitfalls? I find that one of the biggest things that I have to watch out for in working remote is maintaining work-life balance. And this term's highly debated, let's say, because your work is like part of your life, like your life technically encompasses everything. But I like to use it as just a shortcut for the stuff that is outside of what you get paid for and the stuff that you actually get paid for. Like, how do you find balance in those things? And when you work in a distributed team, many times you don't leave your workspace behind at the end of the day. You don't have a commute that separates those things. So how do we find and maintain balance so that we don't work all the time? Or even find ways that our mind is able to check out at the end of the day and doesn't feel like we're constantly overloaded with tasks. One of the biggest ways I find is keep a schedule, even if it's a loose one. I'm not someone who has a really strict schedule. Like, I don't have my day entirely laid out, but I do keep a same time start of every day, same time for lunch every day, and same time end for every day. And I find that is really beneficial. Just have the routine, just like if I were to go to an office, and maintain consistency in that. Even if you work an odd schedule, like maybe you're someone who likes getting up early or likes working late, stick to something normal. I find that it really helps maintain a balance in your life. Having a pre-work routine, I have found, has really helped me. So having like a routine of things that I do before I start work every day. And some of that is like just taken up by my family things, and some of that's like personal, just things like being able to just sit down and like have coffee before I go and sit at my desk or whatever. And I got my own routine, but yours will be different. Another thing is dress like you're actually going to work. I don't wear like business casual or suit and tie or anything, but there's kind of a cliche in working remote, or especially from home, I guess. It's like, oh, you can work without your pants on, or oh, you can work in your pajamas. And that's never worked well for me. I find that getting up, taking a shower, putting clothes on like as if I were to go to an office really helps get myself in the right mindset to get the job done. Another thing is have a dedicated office space that you actually go to do work. Even if it's not like an office with a door in it, the door can help. If it's just like a desk in the corner of your living room, or maybe a desk in like a family room in the house, or even just like having a routine of getting your stuff out that is your work stuff, like opening up your laptop. If you use a notebook for note-taking, setting your notebook and pen to the side and having a cup of coffee, like having a space that puts yourself in the right muscle memory to get work done. Getting outside regularly can help a lot with maintaining balance, not feeling like you're working all the time. I heard a coworker who will remain anonymous say this genuinely a few years ago, that they had not been outside and had not stepped out the door. They were shocked. They were like, I haven't been outside in 3 days. I haven't checked the mail. I haven't done anything. It's not healthy. Get outside. Get some fresh air. Eat lunch away from your desk, outside if possible. This is something I encourage my team a lot, even if it's just 15 minutes. There's something about stepping away from your desk, eating lunch can be really beneficial. Your brain will work better when you get back, like having that mental recharge and refresh in the middle of the day really helps. And then, of course, exercise. And I feel like a lot of these things are maybe, self-explanatory sometimes, but I have noticed a lot of patterns in my own life and other people that I've worked with in the team have not taken advantage of the flexibility that remote work offers. Sometimes if you have a commute, you maybe pass by a gym on the way, or maybe you work at a campus, like a larger business campus that has a gym there. Those are the type of things that you won't encounter when working remote. So definitely set aside time to just go for a walk or anything. So outside of the work-life balance stuff, how can we actually work from home effectively? When it comes to getting the work done, how can we do it? First and foremost, make achievable goals. For each day, and emphasis on the achievable. So this isn't like the big task that you have to get done. Maybe that, maybe if you're doing development, like that's not the big thing that you're working on for 2 or 3 or 5 days or several weeks. That's like, what can I achieve in that bigger thing today? Because it's easy to like get more of like blur in your day working remote sometimes, because you get like little interruptions in Slack, and it can be a little bit harder to stay on task at times. So it's good to have those achievable goals to keep circling back to am I on track to get these things done? And I generally like to keep it at 2 or 3 like things that are actually achievable to do for the day. I know that if I have like 2 or 3 things in my to-do app, which I'll get to that later, highlighted for the day, then I'm not going to get all of them done generally. Managing daily objectives. There's a few methods out there, really popular ones called Getting Things Done, or GTD. It's laid out in a book by David Allen, which I recommend. It's a little bit of a dry read. I know I'm not selling that part that good, but it does lay out a lot of really, I was laughing there. Yeah, it's a dry read. It does lay out a really good methodology. What are you laughing at?
No, it's a very, very dry read.
Oh, yeah, very. A little bit about that book. So David Allen did like business consulting for a number of years and sort of like developed a pattern that could be used for maintaining all the things that you have to get done. And there's a few different applications that sort of fall in line with that methodology. One is OmniFocus if you're on Mac. I used OmniFocus for a number of years, and I now use an app called Things, quote, Things. And most of these apps will sync across multiple devices, and in some instances different platforms and stuff. Whatever app you choose, just pick one that works for you. But the book Getting Things Done is a good place to start to just sort of wrap your head around how to achieve that. Another method is bullet journaling, which has gotten more popular in the last few years. If you're someone that likes more tactile stuff or is more analog, bullet journaling is a great sort of method to follow, and there's lots of good resources and articles and even some notebooks out there that fall in line with that methodology. Another one is make sure that you maintain an up-to-date calendar for both work and personal commitments. So when you're setting those daily goals for the day, those daily objectives, you don't want to write checks that you can't cash. You want to know what all your appointments are. If you have an hour out in the middle of the day, that's going to severely impact how the rest of your day looks in terms of how much work you're going to get done. Or maybe you had a big set of development tasks you were going to get done, and it turns out you were supposed to be in 3 meetings that day. Make sure your calendar's up to date, and always check it when setting those. Time box work with Pomodoro method or similar. Pomodoro is a method that was laid out. I can't remember who did it, but you work for 25 minutes with a single goal in mind, meaning one thing to work on during that 25 minutes. You take a 3 to 5 minute break, and after doing that 4 times, you take a longer 15 to 30 minute break. And they've done a few different studies on it. I don't cite them because sometimes these studies don't have very large groups to pull from, or very large data sets, but they have done studies on it and concluded that it can help focus. And I've noticed in my own life using Pomodoro or similar, I've never followed the formal 25 minutes. I find that actually 20 minutes and a 2-minute break works better for me, particularly when I'm under a lot of tight deadlines where I have a lot of small things to get done through the day. Maybe it's right before a launch, and I've got a bunch of small bugs I need to fix, and I really need to stay head down. Using a method like time boxing can really help when under situations like that. Ask questions early. Don't do what I call submarining. So when you get assigned work, if you have any questions about that at all, ask it as early as possible. And I find that particularly in remote teams, this can be much more prevalent because there isn't the visibility of frustration. You don't have your coworkers around you seeing that you're frustrated or maybe struggling on something. So make sure that you vocalize that. And additionally, when you ask questions earlier, more frequently, it usually helps expand and clarify, like, you know, the body of work that's needed to be working on, and also builds openness and transparency in the team as well. Shift work locations. This is one thing that I really learned from Dr. David Norman here. Whether that's a coffee shop, a park, your front porch, whatever, shifting work locations can really help reset your mind a lot. And getting out to things like co-working spaces can also really help. And it's interesting because I in some ways I feel like that's in conflict with like having the work routine or the dedicated workspace. But something about just like shifting from that dedicated workspace to somewhere else for a couple hours does something. Like when I'm in a mental block or finding that I'm getting distracted, just like relocating to somewhere else can be really helpful.
That's definitely a whiskey glass too, so I bet that helps. It was for sure a whiskey glass in the picture, just so you know.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I did see that. But yeah, you know, if it's towards the end of the day and you're clocked out.
Right.
Don Draper.
Taking calls on walks can be really, really beneficial. There's a period of time that I did this quite a bit because I was having a lot more calls than I have now. I don't have as many calls as I used to. I'm generally on calls like outside of like screen shares and pair programming on stuff. I'm on like 15 minutes of calls a day generally, maybe 30 tops. But when I was on a lot more calls, there was a period of time where I got in a good routine of this. Obviously, some work environments may not be as friendly to this, like if they hear birds chirping in the background, stuff like that. Funny story, there was a period of time where I did my morning scrum outside every morning, and it's North Carolina, so there's birds chirping everywhere in the spring. And one day, a colleague piped in their basement, working in their basement office, piped in a loop of bird sounds during their routine. It's quite amusing. Anyway, yeah, take calls on walks. Getting outside can help. Again, getting up from the desk, allowing your brain to reset. I'll generally my workflow for that is if it's like a Scrum update, like you need to report what you've been working on, what you're going to work on next, I'll just jot down on my phone before I leave, issue numbers and things like that, so that I have an actually like precise, as precise as what I would have as my desk, so it's still a beneficial call for the team. So that's touching on more of the personal side of things. So how do we stay connected as a team? First and foremost, agree on your workflows and tools. So whatever you do, whether it's audio calls, video calls, screen sharing, email usage, project management tools, documentation, pick one tool. I'm trying to keep myself from yelling here. Pick one tool and stick to it. And don't jump around. Don't spend a week on one thing. Say, oh, this isn't working. Jump around to something else. Pick one tool and stick to it. Nothing's perfect, but stick to it. And this is especially hard in the age where we have so many chat apps. You got Slack, Twist, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, Flock, Discord, Cisco, WebEx, Teams, Mattermost, Rocket Chat, IRC, Zoho, Click, RingCentral, Telegram, and that's just to name a few. There's a bunch more. Like when I was searching just to fill that list with something absurd, there's so many different things. And that's not even covering like personal stuff like Facebook Messenger and all the others. Anyway, pick something, stick to it. Nothing's perfect, but just whatever works for your team. We use Slack at Platform. I think that's probably the most popular now. I don't know if it has the largest user base, but it definitely has the most sort of energy behind it. And a lot of like third-party apps, have like stuff that'll like webhooks and things that support it. Anyway, team chat best practices. So a lot of times, and coming from different company cultures, whether it be like maybe an old school like IRC culture, or even like someone coming from using primarily email for communication. Because like at Platform, we hardly ever send email. Like I don't think I've sent more than 4 emails in a year at Platform. Like everything lives in like another system or is in Slack. And all that, everything that's emailed is like maybe an HR related thing, like a document you have to sign. It's probably 4 or 5, maybe a few more. So one thing that I've noticed a pattern that happens a lot is when people just send a message like hello or good morning, and I'll get back to my desk like an hour later and they'll already be offline and they'll have just said hello, and then I'll reply, and then later when I'm offline again they'll ask their question. Just send your message. Don't just say hello. You can say you can be cordial, fulfill the social contract. Hey, how's your day going? Good morning. Then ask your question or give them the day again. Fulfill the social contract. Be friendly. Be cordial. But don't just say hello. Actually, just say what you're going to say, and they can get back to it. And some of that stems also from IRC culture. So in IRC culture, we had the like ping, where you'd like ping someone's username to see if they were online, and that was always. There were certain reasons for that. One of them is with IRC bots, it was actually a little bit difficult to tell when someone was online because we had like servers that kept our username logged into IRC, so it's difficult to tell when someone was actually online or not. If you actually want to talk about something with them, they might not be online. With modern chat clients like Slack and all these others, you can tell when someone's online or not. So the whole like ping or saying hello thing is unnecessary, in my opinion. Another thing is update your status throughout the day, whether it's like Slack's status feature where it's like /status space and then the name of your status. I'll do things like on the phone or head down in code or relocating or on lunch and that sort of thing. I'm not super strict about this, but I do try and do it when I remember, and I think it's helpful for letting your team know how long it's going to be before you're back. So if like I'm on lunch, a lot of times I'll get back from my lunch break and I'll have a message there that says, hey, when you're back from lunch, do you mind looking into this issue that we're having over here? So it helps maintain visibility for, I'm not at my desk, but I'm going to be back in a short while versus I'm maybe out the rest of the afternoon and going to be back this evening or something like that. Keep stuff in team channels over private messages when possible. This helps with visibility, helps with not having to be too redundant and stuff. It's really annoying to say a thing in a PM and maybe say a thing in a private channel and then have to repeat the thing again in a public channel. Keep it in public channels if at all possible. Just helps with transparency and build openness in the team and collaboration and all that. And also, it helps with not having as many notifications. Like I can't stand it when I come back and I've got like 5 private messages. I mean, sometimes something has to be private if it's a little bit more sensitive, but a lot of times it doesn't. Something that can live in a public channel. Especially when you have things like Slack threads. Slack threads are a little controversial. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them. So, if the channel is very noisy, which we have some very noisy channels at Platform, threads can be useful, I've found. But I don't like how stuff can get buried in them very easily. Like, you can miss an important piece of information because you didn't think that the root cause of why the thread was broken off was something that you needed to know, that sort of thing. But I have found them useful since joining Platform.
One tip on that is that if you check the box that says something like show the threaded response in the channel, that's useful.
Oh yes,
think about it.
yeah.
Like it means
I will do that.
Ahead.
I'll do that. Yeah. So to make sure it gets on the recording, Slack has a feature where if you're replying in a thread, you can check a box that says send to channel. So if it's something that you want tied to a thread of conversation, but you know that the rest of the people in the channel need to know and want to make sure that information is not lost, it will get attached to the thread and then also appear in the main channel as well. Really useful. Don't undervalue conference calls. And I am talking about like old school conference call in that case. Like I have found that at times, like an Uber conference line is very useful because everybody's got a phone number. Like, and even if there's some person, maybe they're in another country, they don't have a cell phone, there's easy ways to like dial into a conference line. That also helps with the allowing your team to work as they want. So if there's people like myself that at times like to walk on a call, it can work a little bit more easily than keeping like Google Hangouts or Zoom or anything on your phone. You just have a number that you dial into, especially if it's a recurring call, because you can just save that conference call line as a number, or the number as a contact in your phone, and get to it very easily. Voice over IP solutions are great, but at times just a conference line is useful. And with tools like Uber Conference, and I'm sure there's a slew of others as well, you can actually call in through a browser. So if there's someone that's like, I don't want to pull up my cell phone, they can just pull it up on their desktop, and it does like, just voice over IP through your browser. Video calls are really useful for keeping FaceTime. FaceTime being the interaction, not the trademark. Really important for keeping teams connected, whether that's Google Hangouts or Meet, whatever it's called. Zoom, yes. Zoom had a major security vulnerability recently. But it's still good software. They patched it. I say that with a little trepidation because this is getting recorded. As of right now, they've patched it to the best of our knowledge. So if you do have Zoom installed, make sure it's patched. Skype, whatever it is, again, just standardize on it. But video calls are really useful. It helps pick up on some of your team's personality too. That doesn't always come through on an audio call. Have a place for document collaboration. I mentioned Confluence here because it can be used for document collaboration, but it's also used for documentation a lot. So I look at tools like Google Docs and Dropbox Paper and that sort of thing as virtual whiteboards in a lot of ways, places to do brainstorming and at times document stuff, but generally not have it be information that's going to get archived somewhere else. Like if it maybe writing up a long specification for a body of work that needs to get done, and when the work gets done, it doesn't matter if the Google Doc gets lost. If it's information that really needs to persist for some lengthy period of time, whether that's the life of the company or needs to constantly be revisioned as processes are changed, things like that, I find that Google Docs isn't the best place for that stuff to live. But it's definitely useful for collaboration as well as Confluence and Dropbox Paper. And there's others, there's Quip, which is owned by Salesforce, and a number of other things. If you're a programmer, pair programming can be really helpful. A great tool for this now is Visual Studio Code. So if you already use Visual Studio Code, great, because it has pair programming tools already built in that allows you to have a cursor on the other person's screen and like share all the files and edit the files on the other person's computer, and even like share their shell through Visual Studio Code. And then I think there's even some other stuff that will allow you to collaborate on. Like when I say collaborate, in this case, meaning like do some other things on the other person's computer. So, and I've used that quite a bit. It's one of the better solutions for it. There's also a Tmux. So if you're a Vim user or alternative to Vim, Emacs, sorry, Vim or Emacs user.
Which one do you like?
No comment. Vim or Emacs user, you can use it. You can spin up a Tmux session, and then using a tool like ngrok, which allows you to create a proxy to your local. Again, there's security stuff in there, so you may want to not do that on your local. You may want to have like a central server where you do pair programming, that sort of thing, but that is an option. And that particularly is, or used to be really popular in the Ruby community. I used to hear lots of like people that did Rails work talk about doing pair programming that way. Tuple is a Mac app that was recently released, which I have not used. I haven't roped anybody into trying it with me yet, but it looks really interesting. It's supposed to be highly performant. That is a premium product. but it's supposed to be really fast. And I will say that Visual Studio Code sometimes can have a performance impact on your machine. So tuple may be something to check out. And then, of course, just general screen sharing. So if someone doesn't want to do the whole pairing thing, maybe they're just willing to share their screen, and you can talk through stuff. Even if it's just like edit line 32, change that variable name, can be really useful. Project management tools. Again, central place, one tool if possible. With client services, this isn't always possible because a lot of times you'll be integrating with another company and another team, but try and at least within your company standardize on what processes you're going to use. Some basic ones are Trello, GitHub Issues, Basecamp, to name a few. I've used all three of those in smaller projects where there's only like 2 or 3 team members and things are really lightweight. All those have been really useful. Different times. If you need something more robust, there's Asana. Jira is probably the most popular. And then if you need to self-host, you can do Redmine. I haven't used Redmine in a really long time, but I did check it out before putting it on the slide. And it looks like it is still maintained. Still has some recent commits, but yeah, it's one that's written in Ruby. So if you know Ruby a little bit, and you need to self-host it, you can use that one. But again, pick your tool. And by the way, if anyone needs to interrupt or has questions, comments, concerns, objections, feel free to speak up. Go ahead, sir.
Back to the best practices slide. So I've only been working remotely for a year-ish time. And one thing I found really interesting about working remotely is like creating a rapport with your team, creating a rapport with these individuals that you only get to see out in Slack. You only get to see.
Touch on that.
Oh, you already touched on that?
Yeah.
All right. So my one concern with and this can be taken in multiple ways, but like the don't say hi, like the general, you don't need a hello to get to the point.
I'm gonna get to that
Yeah,
for sure.
That was just a concern of mine because it's like, yeah, you don't have to. There's a lot of things you don't have to do. But in terms of like still, being able to keep an open platform for people to be able to communicate with each other is something I see as an important part to make sure that the job is not just a job.
Yeah.
Right?
I have a thought on that though, and I
Go ahead.
And I see, like I totally know.
I'm shocked you have a thought.
I have a shock thought. Because I think I agree with Rob that saying hi, hello, things like that, and then like continuing the conversation immediately.
Again, fulfill the social
What
contract.
I feel like what you were getting at about not saying hello, this is what happens to me on a few people, and I will tell you how to stop it because we've talked about this. I will have somebody on a team go in a DM especially, hello.
Yeah.
And then what I'll do is I will just not answer that. And I will let it sit there and wait until they come back and say, what are they going to say? Which I think is different than you're coming from, where it's like different. Rob might say hello is a nice salutation kind of thing and then proceed with the comment. Mm-hmm. But I have seen people where they do that and it is somewhat pointless because what am I supposed to say then? Hello back to you. How's the weather? Because go ahead and say, be as nice as you want, use as many words as you want, but you can kind of say it all in one sentence and go ahead and get it out there because the key part is that I might not be able to stop at that point and respond anyway, but I will definitely keep that alert ready to go and jump in there as soon as like I'm done with a meeting or something else I'm working on.
Right. I think that's a good point too because like the Slack part like doesn't mean just because we've gone from email to Slack doesn't mean I'm supposed to be on call for your message.
Exactly.
And that's the inconvenience of the hello. Yeah. How are you? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I should like.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you got emails like that all day long?
Like we should be respectful to other people's time.
Yeah. Thanks for definitely touching on that. And I agree, it is important. I'm going to touch on sort of the rapport side of things later on. And I'm running out of time here. So, community announcement hub. So, I think it's important to have a central place where announcements are made in your company. Don't announce stuff in email because you end up with a super long email thread and it's a nightmare. So whether that's just an internal like blog, WordPress, behind your VPN, you can build it in Drupal. Or there's other stuff like Discourse can be used for this. That we have a Discourse instance that we use for stuff like this at Platform. Just some place where announcements are made. the whole team can be notified, and then there's commenting in that if needed, like people have follow-up questions, that sort of thing. And then it's also easier to find down the road because obviously that's searchable and doesn't get buried in your email inbox. Have a central place for documentation, whether that's Gitbook or in like a static site generator or like old school in air quotes, wikis. Like you can use a wiki. You can use a wiki to create documentation or Confluence, like I mentioned earlier. Just again, keep it in one place. Keep it in one place. We actually went through a little bit of growth period around the time I started at Platform, where stuff had started to get fragmented a little bit, and there was an effort to make sure that all that stuff got consolidated in one place, so that when new hires were brought on, they were able to be sent to one central location for here's all the documentation, and then also. People that are part of the team just have one place to go to, whether it's HR-related info or sort of workflow, best practices stuff, who's over teams and that sort of thing. Keep all meetings on the calendar.
I know you're short on time, but I would just mention also making sure that your documentation tools aren't esoteric. So a lot of times devs want to do a static site generator or something, and then you onboard junior devs and they can't update or change documentation.
Yeah, great point.
Which they're usually the ones that are trying to, because they're going through processes that you haven't gone through in 7 years and trying to update the documentation, and they're asking for help. So just making sure that one tool is super important, but also super accessible.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Whatever your documentation is along those lines, make sure that your HR department likes it.
Yes.
Make sure that they like using the thing. And I mentioned Gitbook because I know previous organization I worked for, some of the HR people liked Gitbook. I think Gitbook might have a web interface or something. I can't recall how that gets managed because it ends up in a Git repository as flat text files. But I think there might be a web interface or something for it. But yeah, make sure that whoever's going to admin it is comfortable doing so, because the engineers are going to move on to something else after they build it. And we all know engineers love writing documentation, right? Keep all meetings on a calendar, especially if you're across time zones. So I work with people all the way in Asia Pacific time zone, and Australia all the way to Pacific Standard Time. So there's times where I'm finishing my day and having people who are from the future in meetings the next day. It's their next day. It's the end of my day. All meetings must go on a calendar, even if it's let's sync up on this in an hour. Throw it on the calendar so you don't forget, and then you don't get confused on time zone stuff. Helpful. So, beating distractions while working remotely. One I find really helpful is an app called Self-Control, and there's a lot of alternatives to it. So, when not working in an office, there isn't the same social pressure of people being able to see Facebook and you stalking your high school friends, while you're supposed to be working. So it can be easy to get distracted and even develop muscle memory at times for opening your Twitter app and surfing Reddit and opening YouTube. Those things can almost become secondary, and it's useful to use a tool like Self-Control, which basically does it applies firewall rules to Mac OS to actually block domain names for a given period of time, and it's pretty hard to undo. Even if you restart your machine, I think it's still the rules still persist until the time's up. You have to go in and manually find the process and kill it.
Some of these will tie into Pomodoro stuff too, so you can actually literally set your Pomodoro stuff and just be blocked in, and then it'll let you browse the web.
That's great. And then sort of along those lines as well, there's some automatic time tracking tools as well, and the names of them are slipping my mind. It would be good to put on this slide.
Rescue Time?
Rescue Time. The premium version of Rescue Time, which is an app that tracks everything you do on your computer and builds pretty charts of how much time you spent actually working versus watching YouTube.
That might be work.
It could be. And there have been times where I needed to look up a tutorial on YouTube and had to figure out how to kill self-control. So it's true. It's true. Yeah. I'm going to move on because I'm running out of time here. Perfect your workspace. So again, whatever that is, if it's a dedicated office, great. Make that space function the way that you want it to. You know, sometimes there's things that are pretty cost effective to like feel a space, make a space feel at home. Like whether it's a plant or a nice picture on the wall, just like make it home. And if you don't have a dedicated office, maybe it's the tools that you use. Like I've spent an absurd amount of time like picking out the headphones that I want to use and my keyboard and my trackpad, just to make sure that I enjoy, you know, my workspace. And keep it clean. I know there's a lot of people that don't mind a messy desk. I'm one that likes everything clean, and also, if possible, I don't like I like having almost nothing on my desk if possible. So my monitor's on an arm. I like having a laptop arm as well, just keyboard, trackpad, and maybe a few other like intentional items like a lamp or something. So, maintaining the human side of relationships outside of the daily grind of getting the work done, like actually, you know, putting in the hours, writing the lines of code, you know, managing your Jira instance, whatever it is. How do we maintain the more human side of relationships when working remote and not get isolated? One of the biggest ways is team on-sites. I consider them essential when we're working remotely. This is a picture of a platform at the team on-site last fall in Barcelona. So platform usually gets together as a company at least once a year, and there are times it isn't policy, but there are times where teams will also get together once or twice if needed outside of that central meetup. And this can be useful not only for getting work done, but also getting to know one another. So sitting down for lunch together, going out to dinner together, you know, doing more social things. Because when you get to know one another better, it can help you work more effectively as a team because you understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you can empathize more with like how people communicate. Like you learn other people's communication styles, and the people that are maybe a little bit more quiet, you can understand maybe when they're a little bit shorter in like their communication online, because that's just the personality. Day to day, to maintain things, maintain the human side of things, that is, have off-topic calls and channels. So whether that's like, you know, an ad hoc, like Google Hangout, where maybe you just say, hey, I'm going to be in this Google Hangout for the next hour or 30 minutes or something working. If anyone wants to come hang out and chat while I'm working, you know, feel free to join. I'll do that stuff. Some have off-topic channels, so that can mean anything from like a channel that's not work-related, like at one of my previous employers, Lullabot, we had a mechanical keyboards channel for all the mechanical keyboard nerds, like myself. Definitely a front runner in that. To talk about mechanical keyboards and platform. We have a few things like that, and we also just have a central random channel where people will just dump random things in there. And that can be like internet memes or anything, just all sorts of random stuff. That's helpful for getting to know each other's personal side. And also if there's like, you know, life updates, it's a good place to put it. One-on-ones is crucial, so getting one-on-ones with managers regularly, whether that's once a week or twice a month or once a month, something. Making sure that you get one-on-ones with your manager is really important. For a period of time, when I worked for Dr. David Norman here, we had a one-on-one once a week. I think it was Tuesday morning, and I would call him, and you know, I would go for a walk. And a lot of times we talk about work, and then sometimes we get off into just a few other things, like you know, just general life stuff. I don't want to give away David's information, so it's being recorded. Do you have anything to add to that, David?
I think it's important just to build teams.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be work related.
Yeah, exactly. Getting to know like the more personal side of stuff, for sure. You know, find ways to simulate sort of the water cooler that you don't have when you're remote, but you do have in an office. You know, you bump into people when you're in an office, where it's walking down the hallway or in the break room or by the water cooler or whatever. To find ways to like encourage others to interact outside of just like the specific issues of what they're working on. Outside of your company relationships, how do we maintain human interactions while working remote? One is local meetups. Highly recommend meetups. I'm not as involved in them as I used to be, but definitely have impacted my career in a lot of ways. Through a local meetup, I met my first employer and got lots of, and where I am today, all because of that. So I highly recommend getting involved in meetups. Great way to meet people that are even outside your company. And talk work stuff, but there's also lots of meetups that are not work related. So maybe you want to get into photography and you're looking for a way to like unwind at the end of the day. There's like photography meetups, just about anything you can think of. Co-working spaces are a great way to get outside the bubble of your company and get more human interaction, as well as cafes, coffee shops, all that good stuff. I usually go to a coffee shop once or twice a week, and also the nice added thing about that is I'm about a 5-minute bike ride from a coffee shop as well, so it's a great way to get an excuse to get a little bit of exercise to and from there. Again, letting my mind unwind a little bit, recharge, work a couple hours, then ride back. It's really hot this time of year, and I'm just not that motivated when it's 95 degrees, especially when I get all sweaty and have to sit down and do work. But when it is, good enough weather, good enough weather, do enjoy, riding when possible. And then co-working in general is a really good way to not develop a lot of isolation. I think that co-working regularly with people, I don't have a co-working space locally, but I get together with a few guys that are local somewhat often, not as often as I'd like just because I get busy and things like that, but somewhat regularly. Having that type of outlet, and again, that's the type of thing that you can develop relationships with people through meetups, and then say, hey, do you want to meet at a coffee shop sometime and just work a couple hours together? And sometimes you may not end up even talking that much. You just work. Another thing is technology-specific Slack, Discord, and IRC communities. So there's like a Drupal Slack that's really popular in the Drupal community. For some reason, a bunch of React people decided to use Discord. Discord's really popular in the gaming world. I'm not a gamer, but apparently Discord's a really big thing. So there's a really active Discord channel for Discord server, which is, as a developer, the fact that they call it a server just annoys me. But yeah. So there's options there. One thing that I've started to do in the last year and a half, 2 years, is try and make lunch appointments like once a week or once every other week with friends that I know locally that maybe work in an office full time that can't meet up to co-work obviously, but they get a lunch break. And since I work from home, I also get flexibility around what their lunch break is. So getting out away from the desk, meeting up for lunch for a little bit, and getting back to work is a really helpful way to not feel isolated, not feel like, oh, I'm just by myself, in this whole thing. I didn't realize that icon was going to do that. That's annoying. That'll make more sense in a minute. If you want to go further, there's some books like Rework and Remote Office Not Required. Those are both written by, their names are slipping my mind, the co-founders of 37 Signals, which is now Basecamp, and they also wrote Ruby on Rails. Wrote those two books, and they're a remote first company. I highly recommend both those books. Yonder.io is a website that's run by the co-founder of Lullabots, Jeff Robbins. And they have articles and a podcast, and then I think they have a mentor program as well, and some type of yearly conference that they have done in the past as well, though I don't know if that's recurring at this point. That can be a great resource. We work remotely, so if you're looking for remote work, Platform SH is hiring remotely. Again, Again, a little plug there. We Work Remotely can be a place to find remote-friendly or remote-first companies. And that's it. That's another thing to note. There's a difference between a company that is willing to hire remote people, meaning that they'll do it if they have to, versus people that have that are remote first, like keep all their communication online in places so that all the remote people can have access to it, which is what I call a remote first company. And that's it. Any questions?
The book named Flow by some pronouncing that I will never do.
Flow.
Flow. You had a slide early on about that open warehouse space, how it doesn't help with your deep work. There's actually another book named Deep Work, I think, by another.
Oh yeah, Cal Newport.
That sounds right.
No.
But Flow kind of has the precursor to Cal's book.
Okay.
For explaining the deep work theory.
Yeah.
People interrupting you during work while you're concentrating. And
so for the recording, a book called Flow, and then also Deep Work as well.
Yeah, Flow has a really long sort of Russian or sort of.
Yeah, cool.
I can't say.
All right, I've got stickers and patches up here. If anyone wants one.
Patches are great.
Yeah, patches are wonderful, and yeah, feel free to ask me any questions afterwards or track me down in the hall if you want to talk this, or even JavaScript stuff. Because I have most of the JavaScript now. So I will talk Drupal. But if you have JavaScript stuff, you can chat too. Thanks, everyone.